Life isn't perfect, and neither are we.
Nope. But we know how to face our fears
And have some fun.
and talk about all the messiest things of life.
Like the messiest things.
Get connected to yourself, get connected to others, and get connected to the life right in front of you.
This is The Connected Life with Justin and Abby.
That's me.
That's you.
And you.
Abby, do you know...
I love how it just caught me off guard how you started, Abby.
Abby, I've been told that I have broad shoulders.
Oh my gosh. Have you?
Yeah.
You have, I think you have great pecs.
I've been told you have broad shoulders. Has anyone else in here been told they have broad shoulders? Anybody? Maybe. Does anyone feel like they have broad shoulders?
Oh my God. No.
I wish I could say no. I want to be in Abby's position right now. No, it's fine. I'm owning them.
I don't think you want to be in my position right now. Right now, I'm like, Justin, this is not what I would do to open it. And I'm like, oh my God, is Courtney okay? And then I'm like, everybody's laughing. Is it good or is it bad? I can't tell. Do we need to re-record the intro? I don't know.
Don't worry about it. Her anxiety is in her foot. I'm watching it twitch. She's like...
I was actually just remembering in high school when a boy was interested in me and he was like, "You're strong as an ox." And I was like, wait, what?
Wait, okay. Is that true?
Yeah, no, it's true. I was just remembering that. I mean, it didn't offend me, but
adorable.
I was like, was it?
I say you must get it.
It is when he likes you.
Oh, yeah, okay.
I think that's like a great compliment.
Yeah.
If a guy told me I was as strong as an ox, I would feel like that was like the best case scenario.
Uh-huh.
I say you must get it. Honestly, I was getting fitted for a wedding dress and, well, not my wedding dress, but a dress that I was going to wear in a wedding. Mm-hmm. And she said, "Are you a gymnast or a, and I said, no, or a swimmer?" And I said, "No, why?" And she goes, "Because your shoulders are so broad."
Oh, my gosh.
That's the same issue. I thought you were joking when you put your hand up. See, here's the deal. Who we have in the background is our dear friend Courtney and her mom Katie. And Courtney is hysterical and her mom is equally funny. Like when I met you the other night, Katie, I was like, oh, that's where all the wit comes from.
Yep.
It's from mom.
And Justin profusely likes to tease.
Well, Courtney is like another sister to me, 1000%. And we have like a deep, loving relationship, and part of that is making fun of each other.
That's true. It is very endearing.
And Courtney randomly talked about having broad shoulders one time, and I'm like, you do not have broad shoulders. I thought it was the silliest thing on the face of the planet.
She has great shoulders.
I was like, you have great shoulders. So then I started joking about them all the time.
You joke about it because it's not true. If it was true, would you joke about it?
Oh, no.
She'd take you out.
I know, right? Strong as an ox. I'm coming for you.
and Katie, you're I can't believe that you were told you were, that they made it.
Maybe it's just women who are in shape.
In shape, yeah.
Maybe.
Yeah.
You look fit.
Yes.
Katie is deceivingly
Old.
I don't know how he's getting It's really the only option.
I always say I don't want to age on time, so I'm not sure if that's a compliment or
Yeah. Yeah, you look young.
Yeah.
And
Thank you.
fit and trim.
Yeah. It's so deceiving. You're like, this is how old I am. Like, you're a liar.
You're a liar. Yeah.
She looks so youthful. I love it. So
it's very true.
It's so enjoyable to have one of our best friends' mothers with us present for this time.
And you're so brave and courageous. I love it. You've listened to the podcast before.
Absolutely.
And I love when she got here. She's like, I want to see where it's done. So Justin showed her the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle diagram.
Yeah.
I almost said diaphragm.
Diaphragm.
There we go.
Not made
3
that
women
yet.
to 1 man.
Did you think, wow, what a man child?
I did. I actually told you that my grandsons would love this.
I know. When she said that, I was like, that is not the name of her adult son.
So we're so thankful to have you both on this week. It's so fun having you here. And I'm excited for the listeners. We're going to kind of talk through. I love it because both Courtney and Katie have been on an emotional health journey that has radically changed their relationship and their own personal world. And it's really inspiring. One of the things I think me and Justin love the most is getting to see whole families or whole friend groups run after health together and get common language and common understanding, and so that they can dive deeper into connection with each other. And we've had several, a lot of people we know in Living Fully Alive, which is a course that we run, do it as a group.
They do it as a collective. Yeah. He's kind of a brother of mine. He literally was my mom's son, but stepson.
Yeah.
He ended up doing it with his like 4 or 5 different couples. And they said they got the most breakthrough in their entire lives they ever have. And now they're the most deeply connected because they have the same language and they've gone through pain together, shed tears together, got vulnerable and open together. And that's a huge critical part of the transformation process, is when we get together with other people that we love, build language around communication and start to understand each other.
Yeah. So I'm excited about this podcast. I think we're gonna get to just listen to a story of love and healing and goodness, and it's gonna be encouraging for any of you out there that is on your own transformation process to hear. I just think it's super hopeful when you hear somebody else's story.
And before we get started, Katie, you were saying to me, I think when we were in the other room chatting, I think you said something about, Justin, you're my favorite host on the podcast. And did you want to elaborate more on that?
Just your banter, how funny you are, the love that you and Abby have together.
Oh, geez. Okay.
It's so fresh.
Oh, okay. You didn't have to do that.
How much you love my daughter.
Yeah. Oh, that's true. I do love her a lot. Very thankful for her.
Okay.
So, Abby, you run the show.
I'm going to run the show. Okay. So, Courtney, we met how many years ago?
2014.
Okay.
7.
Wow. And do you want to let's start with your journey, why you decided to start going on a health journey, and let's just jump into the story.
Right. So why I thought I was going on the health journey was because I was processing just like self-hatred, body image. And so I thought like, oh, this is like, people talk about this all the time. So this will be an easy, vulnerable thing to do. So I was talking to a pastor about it, and she was like, yeah, Courtney, I think you've done everything you know how to do on your own. I think it would feel really helpful for someone else to lead you in the next steps. And I was like, yes, great, let's do it. And so she had reached out to the pastor that was actually leading me when I was in the ministry school, and let him know that we had had a conversation, and I was going to go talk to him, but it was kind of like the perfect storm of God taking over and me not having any space to like be scared and pull away. And so he had gotten the email and then reached out to you and me together in an email and was like, hey, Abby, I have this student. I think it'd be great for you to meet with her. But the irony of all of it is you were like the one person I was so terrified of. So it was a 3-year ministry school. My first year was your last year pastoring. And I was like, I remember going to a church service where you were preaching, and I was like, oh, everything she's saying I want, and I'm so scared about what that is. And she feels so free to talk about it, and that feels even scarier. Like she has no boundaries around like the shame of this. And so I just remember being like, I really desperately wanted it, and I think that was like the kindness of God to be like, I know that you really want this, but your fear is going to hold you back from it. So before my fear could, you had gotten the email and replied, and we were like, yes, that would be great. And I was like, whoa. But I was raised in a very competitive, by my mom over here. Actually, not my dad, Katie. Actually, just my mom. And I was like, okay, well, now I can't say no. It's go time. But so I emailed you back, and I was like, well, to be fair and completely honest, I'm terrified of you. But you
did say that.
Yeah, I was like, oof. Okay, let's go. So I think I was going.
You were terrified because I was so anti-shame.
Yeah, and just I think
being honest.
Yeah, and I think I was like the very beginning parts of processing what is shame and do I actually have a lot of it. I did a good job of like denial. That's kind of how I existed for a long time.
You and Abby both.
Yeah. That's
truth.
Yeah. So I was scared to actually look at the things that were causing me the self-hatred. But it felt really easy to say that it was about body image because that's like all I knew. So yeah, that is how we got connected. And then I showed up. At that point, you were doing meetings at home on your comfy couch. And I remember being so scared. And I'm like, is this the right address? I don't know. This feels so weird. And so I like knock on the door. No one answers. I better do it one more time. Knock on the door. And then this older woman answers with like, I was like, I have no idea who this is. And so I was like, oh, sorry. I'm here to see Abby. And then your little head, very messy hair, pops up from like the couch.
Why does
and
this
she was
not
like,
surprise me?
oh, are we meeting today? And I was like, no, it's fine. And you were like, no, come in. I just had a migraine and my friend was giving me a massage. And I was like, I can come back later. No, come on in. And I was like, oh, dang it. We're really going to do this, aren't we? But it was probably
That's
very
a good way to
comforting.
break the ice because I would look like a crazy person. I was doing meetings in my house because I was sick so often.
Yeah.
But yeah, I remember you coming and being like, oh shoot. So then I kicked my friend out and then we sat down on the couch and went for it.
I know. It was honestly, I think looking back now, I'm like, oh, God is so kind. If I had to walk into a really sterile environment, I would have been like,
it disarmed you. I purposely disarmed you.
Totally.
I read that email. You're so terrified. You know what I'll do? I will take the stakes down.
You have done that a lot, actually.
Really lowered the bar.
Yeah.
Okay, so then talk about like the beginning journey with me.
Yeah, so again, I thought we were going to talk about body image and you were like, tell me about your life. And I was like, I mean, I just played basketball my whole life. Like that was all. And it was like pretty good. And
Had a great life. I played basketball. That was the story. I was like,
I know, but you were really like gracious and being like, yeah, that's okay. And then I don't know if it was the first or the second meeting, but then I was like, oh, also, yeah, one time this thing happened, which was like I had blown up my world for like a good like 3 years. And it was like an afterthought. That's how much denial I was in, that I was like, oh, also like outside of my basketball life, I blew up my life. And you were like, oh, have you told anyone about that? And I was like, no. And you were like, so you've not told your parents about it? And I was like, no, and I'm not ever going to. Which the funny thing about that,
I'm not ever going to.
I know, is that like I've literally grew up telling my mom and dad everything. Like I would at 11:30 p.m. like could not fall asleep at night at like 10 because my brother and I were playing basketball outside, and I called him like, I think I said like shit or something, and I would like wake my mom up. I'm like, Mom, today when Kyle and I were playing basketball, I said shit. And she was like, okay, thanks for telling me. Yeah, I was like,
solution.
Oh, yeah. I was like, okay, well, okay. She's like, thanks for telling me. You can go to bed. So
she was like the priest that like absolved you of your
exactly.
sins.
It was, yeah. And we were raised Catholic, so it just felt right. Mom, can you remove that sheet real quick? I need to tell you something. Anyhow, so when I was like, no, and I'm never going to, it was like, this is the only thing I've never shared with my parents. So there was a part of me, I'm sure, that really wanted to. And then you just like really put it out there and we're like, well, we can talk and go around this mountain all day long, but until you tell your parents, you're not going to get any breakthrough. And I was like, okay, fine, I'll do it tomorrow. But I think actually what I said was, do you have a trash can? And you were like, are you going to throw up? And I was like, I think so.
That's exactly what happened. She had such a violent reaction to the idea of telling, and that's what shame does. Shame so cripples us and locks us up. And the lie of shame is you'll never be loved if people know this about you. No one will ever love you again. This is the one thing you could be rejected for. Like the fear of disappointing people was so great. I think that's why you had a physical reaction.
Yeah, I know. And I had done
I did grab my trash can for
such a good job of being perfect most of my life, you know? So it was like, I can't tell them this thing.
Yeah. Well, and the thing about it is because you'd done such a good job being perfect your whole life, you blew your life up.
Exactly.
And that happens to a lot of people.
Yeah.
When they perform, and they're shoving down pain, and they're just doing the perfect thing, and they're trying to do what's right, but they're not actually connecting to themselves or what's going on inside of themselves. When we abandon ourselves over and over and over again, at some point it explodes.
Yeah, nuclear.
All of the pain that we had shows up, and that's what happened in your life. Is you'd been perfect, but also I'm not dealing with my emotions. I'm not taking care of myself. I'm not setting boundaries. I'm not having a voice for myself. I'm just being perfect. And then one day, all of the things that you weren't doing blew up at you.
Yeah. Yeah. It was real. So I think like probably the next day, I called my mom and dad and was like, oh, I remember being so devastated to be like, I'm not perfect. Aww. And also just so scared because I'm like, man, I really have like done, I mean, obviously like I wasn't perfect, but I hadn't all of the things that were like,
the good kid.
I never drank or, did all the things that people do, So I was like, oh God, and this is what I have to tell them. And I remember my dad was really proud of me, but also like not super emotionally connected. So I think my biggest fear was like, my dad isn't going to know how to engage in this conversation, and that is going to feel like massive rejection. Right. And so we were on FaceTime because they lived in Indiana, I lived in California, and I was already a hot mess, and I think they were probably both like, what the and I was like, I need to tell you something. And my dad was the first one that spoke, and that was shocking to me too. And he was like, oh, Courtney, I'm so sorry, like there's nothing that you can do that would make us not love you. And I was like, I didn't know how much I needed to hear that. Aww. Like it was such a...
Oh, are you crying, Katie? I love it.
It really broke, obviously, something in me around performance that I was like, wait, my dad is... Not only is he not emotionally connected often, or like, and he was pretty passive, so he wasn't going to be the first one to talk. And for him to like speak into that in that moment, I was like... Okay, well, I have a long journey ahead of like this whole shame scenario, but at least I feel like I'm still loved. And that was my biggest fear.
Yeah.
What are you feeling over there, Katie?
I think that I knew that there was something in Courtney's life that had changed. And I've always had a closeness, but there was somewhat of a distance, and I didn't know what it was. And I have the personality that I'm not necessarily completely okay if you're not okay.
just that tinge of codependence.
Yeah, I'm pretty good at that. So I was really proud of Fel that's what I call him.
Yeah.
To be able to speak. I think I was, when she shared, I think I was more fearful of his reaction. And I was aware that if she didn't get that love that she so desperately needed, and the sharing was so critical, that I think I was more concerned of his reaction for her,
right,
than what I could possibly say. So I think at that moment I was so grateful that he had the Father's heart, and he could share that love, and then I could come in the same thing.
Yeah.
What did you feel hearing her share? Did it like make you feel love towards her?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, the distance was so far that obviously I couldn't embrace her and hug her. But just to know that we would never stop loving her for anything. She's our little girl.
You guys.
I know.
This is so sweet. My little heart feels full. Which really started a relationship between you guys throughout counseling, where you could be, not counseling, but throughout consulting, where you could be really honest with each other.
Did that feel like a big instigator for that?
Oh, I think so. Absolutely. Because she would share her journey, and I feel like she was back to her again, even though it was a painful her and it was a new court, but I just feel like there was such a weight lifted off of her then she could share And I guess as a mom, I knew that she was making progress forward to getting back to whole.
That feels really good.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was my biggest fear was that my dad wouldn't know how to like show up. And then I would be alone processing just everything that I hadn't processed, But then I remember them calling me one day and were like, we want to pay for you to meet with Abi. And for 3 years, it was like, it felt like such a gift because like being able to show up in this space where, so like I had like uncovered this huge thing that I'm like, oh my gosh, I've been in denial. And now what do I do with it? And so even just the safety of knowing that there's someone who can
I'm going to stop really quick right there and then have you
You're
say
probably
that.
thinking what I was going to say.
Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Oh, let's see.
I think a lot of people get such an endorphin hit from that initial telling.
Yeah.
And feeling like, oh, so much shame broke off. I'm good now. Like the whole, do you want to expand on that?
No, go ahead.
Well,
It's all you.
the whole
Carry the football across the line there.
Well, I think, and I've seen that happen a lot where I'm at, because one part of breaking shame is being honest.
Yeah.
That's a huge part, bringing it out into the light, letting people know, letting people love you. But that doesn't actually just end all of the shame magically. No. And so there is more to like sort through. And so I love you sharing that it wasn't just a one-time, like the one-time moment launched you forward to be able to dig in.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, gave you the strength to do the rest.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. I think that I could have spiraled really hard if I would have shared and then been like wide open and not known where to go with it. Yeah. So for them to not only show up really well in that space, because it's not like I was stable in my sharing. I felt very like swirly, and for them to be like, we actually want to sow into your healing journey.
One thing that I see, a lot of parents want to, give their kids better lives. And a lot of times that's through giving them finances towards external things. But to me,
college, cars.
Right. The best gift.
Cars.
Not cars. But the best gift we can give is that of physical and emotional health. Like if a parent could really impart anything to their children, it's those two things, because when a child's equipped with both physical and emotional health, they can make whatever life they want or need to create from that point forward. Yeah. Yeah. So that's really beautiful. Thank you, Katie, for giving that gift to Courtney.
Yeah. Well,
as I said to you guys, thank you both. Because you're a huge part of her journey and healing.
Yeah.
Thanks, Katie.
So then you met with me for 3 years and your parents paid for it, so you couldn't excuse yourself out of it.
I know, right? There's no excuse.
And then it's also our fault that she started lighting fires and conversations with you, Katie. So you're welcome.
Yeah. I mean, I think it did then become an interesting journey because my mom and I were so close. And then when I kind of blew up my life but tried to keep it all to myself, I didn't know how to juggle it all. And I was aware that there was distance, and I knew I was hurting people around me. But I remember the day that like my mom was like, "What? I don't know what I've done." And I remember breaking and being like, I'm like, she has no idea what's going on inside of me, and I don't know how to tell her, but I'm just hurting her. And it's like so to be able to start having those conversations where I could take ownership of the why behind, not that it made it okay. Sure. It wasn't an excuse for me to be like, whatever.
But clarity is a big deal.
For sure. And I think the more that I could process what was going on inside of me, the more known that I felt and the less out of control that my mom felt. And so it wasn't this like confusing back and forth where she's like trying to love me and I'm like not letting any love in. And so the conversations that came after the first breaking shame scenario, to be able to be like, hey, let's talk about what is actually going on inside of me. My dad less interested in the consistency of those conversations, but I still felt his love, but it wasn't like my mom was so hungry to understand not just me, but to like, I remember her consistently being like, I'm just like, everything that you're learning, it feels, I'm so proud of you, but also like, she wanted to hear more, like not because she wanted to know. I mean, she wanted to know what's going on inside of me, but she was also seeing like there is so much transformation happening in you, and listening to you talk about it, I am getting like more and more intrigued by what I could be experiencing.
What was happening for you, Katie, in that? Like she just described what she thought was your world. Is that true? Was it like enticing for you?
Yeah, I just think having more of a voice. Of course, the language that has been used, it was completely unfamiliar to me. So to try and navigate through all that was
you're like, what are these things you speak of?
I know what you're talking about.
It's a different language.
Yeah, but I think just for me to watch her take ownership of situations and set up boundaries. I'd never heard of boundaries. Like you have a boundary in your yard that the kids don't go out of and people don't come in. But and I didn't grow up with that. So to understand like, oh man, I was so excited for her at her young age to get these tools that I never had. And then to see what I could grab on and just see if I could make my life, even, within school, within my players, our kids and our marriage, etc., all those kind of things. So I think I was just more intrigued by like, oh, you have a right to say that? You have a right to do that? Oh, like I don't have to just please people? Like, oh, I didn't know I could have a voice. So completely foreign to me.
Wow. So you started finding a lot of permission to be yourself, to express yourself.
Right.
Yeah,
because, I mean, my husband was more like, oh, you don't make waves, just let it go, just be quiet, you never know when that's going to come back and get you in the end. Oh. And so you're just silent.
Oh.
So
it must have felt so good to break the silence.
I'm working on it.
I'm getting there.
It's feeling a little bit better sometimes.
A lot of guilt with it when, like, was that okay? Uh-oh, how's that going to come back and get me? Should have I said that?
It's amazing how much when we're around a certain perspective or mindset for years and years and years, how deeply ingrained it gets in us. So like even what you said, this is going to come back and get me. You heard it probably over and over and over again. And then it becomes, and this happens to all of us, it becomes a voice in our head. And so that's why I love like when you have somebody that's helping you walk out of it, because you get to have new voices say the opposite truth over and over and over again. Like, no, you're worthy of having a voice. No, you're worthy of having a voice. It's okay for you to set boundaries. It's okay for you to do that. And it can take years to unwind the things that we believe the deepest.
Yeah. Well, I was just thinking about how many times you would tell me something and my immediate response was like, anxious, like tight stomach. I'm like, I can't do that. And the like little performer in me was like, okay, Abby said I have to do that thing. But like, I've clearly blown up my world, so I don't know if I should trust me. Okay, fine, I'll do it. It was a very, a little codependent, but like I trusted you more than I trusted me for sure at that point. And I was like, are you sure this is not what my dad ever told me I could do?
This is not what my dad.
So I'm not going to tell him that you said that.
That's funny.
But it was like the consistency of it where I started to build this like muscle in me of, oh, maybe that is true. Maybe if I look outside of the box and outside of my fear, I can see a different possibility and freedom.
Yeah, I would say I'm so sorry. A lot of the I would say that a lot of the way that you live your life now is against all of the rules that you had in your head growing up.
Totally. Yeah, I think I have become quite aware of how the rules have trapped me. And so I would say now I'm at a point where I can really feel when I'm being trapped in my trigger space where I'm like, oh, this is like bumping up against something that I know I don't want to choose into. And so I have to feel the trigger to be like, wait, this isn't, I know I'm about to do something that I was trained to believe wasn't allowed.
Right.
And let myself intentionally choose it. And that has been so freeing because then it's become a choice of mine where I'm seeing what I believed for so long and looking at it and like, oh, that's actually not what I want to believe anymore.
Yeah. Versus like what I hear you saying is I lived according to programming. And what's beautiful is that now I get to actually, even if I made a choice over here that would resemble some of the former programming as far as like, I'm not going to say anything. It's because I've chosen it.
Yeah.
Not just because I'm being driven by programming.
Yep.
Yeah. It's really
that
good.
makes sense.
Okay, so then you went through a pretty intense season with your dad.
Yeah.
After doing emotional health for a few years. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. My biggest fear, actually, most of my life was that my dad was going to die. My parents were 16 years apart. So at some point in like elementary school, my little brain thought, wait, my dad has gray hair. I think he grayed early, but anyhow, my dad has gray hair and these mean boys are like, your grandpa's here to pick you up. And immediately I was like, okay, dad is grandpa age. Grandpa's died before dad's. My dad might die. And so for a lot of my life, it was like this huge fear
Carrying
and
that.
anxiety of that. And so Abby and I had been meeting for probably 2 years every week. And the way that basically my dad just pretty quickly wasn't feeling well and then was diagnosed with stage 4 pancreatic cancer.
Oof.
And that was shocking and also hit so many buttons of like, I was afraid of this. Did I make it happen? You know, like all of it, you know. And I remember calling you and I told you, I think my dad is going to die. Like, I think he has cancer. They're still waiting for the test results. And we had enough history that I felt really loved by you. But in that moment, you're like, okay, well, what's the worst that could happen? And I was like, dear Lord.
It sounds so callous.
Well, yeah, but I felt loved by you.
But it
you know?
wasn't calloused.
Yeah, no. And because you also knew that was my fear. And so I was like, that my dad would die. Like, I actually don't know what would be worse.
Totally.
And you're like, okay, will you be okay? And I remember being like, I haven't thought about that. And when you ask me that, my answer is, I don't know.
Totally.
And that is what I said. I was like, I don't know. And you're like, that is actually the problem that we have to look at.
Yeah.
And I was like, man, I think the moments where you have like removed the soft, like everything's going to be okay. And you have to connect to reality feels really painful because someone's telling you like, yeah, your dad might die.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay. But then it set me up so much more for success to be like, I'm not going to live in denial. I do believe in healing. I don't know if my dad's going to get healed. I'm going to try and balance these two, but I want to be present because he might die. Yeah. And so that process, well, it was very painful. It was very quick. So I think he was diagnosed and they were going to try and do some chemo, but that didn't really work so well. And so he basically ended up living for 2 months and I had moved back home. But being there every day, watching that whole scenario unfold, being connected to my fears, knowing that my dad's never going to meet my husband or my grandkids. He's not going to walk me down the aisle. Like those things I think could have felt really easy for me to avoid feeling. And because of the conversations that we had, it actually left me with memories that were really painful but beautiful. Like I remember sitting next to him on the couch one day and he really didn't know what to do. So he was just like good at being quiet and present, and I felt his love in that. And he was like patting my leg and he was like, I'm so sorry, sis. Like, I'm so sorry. I'm not going to be able to be there. And I think just being able to hear him say that, if I wasn't letting myself be present with like, Dad, I'm so scared. And he was like, I know. Like, I think seeing him in this space where he actually knew he couldn't do anything. And he was just with me, which actually wasn't his normal, you know, because he wasn't super emotionally connected. And so this part of him came out that was like, yeah, I hear you. And his like, just like he always did this thing where he would just like pat my leg and his like really big but like gentle hand just lay it there and would let me talk and wasn't trying to fix it. He's like, you're gonna be okay, but I wish I could do something, you know. Those moments where I'm like, I would not change anything about the way I processed those 2 months. They're watching my parent, like, it was so painful to be present, but also something that I savor so much, watching my mom and dad like fall more and more in love, knowing that like their time together was ending, was like wild to me because of the vulnerability. And so I think even in that, looking back at this really, really painful season, but also being like, I feel so proud of myself for being present and for being able to say, like, this sucks to be watching. This is really, really hard. This is validating some of my biggest fears, but I believe that I can process through those later. I just want to be present right now.
Well, and one of the things that I thought was so beautiful is, and this felt like truly a miracle, is that you were able to confront him in those 2 months.
Yeah.
And have hard conversations.
Yeah, you didn't just leave stuff buried.
Yeah.
You're like, I'm going to dig stuff up so that we can actually have a dialogue in this space. This is a big deal.
Yeah. Oh, gosh. It was a massive deal. I think going back to 3 years prior and having that conversation with him, and the way that he showed up there, actually probably like 8 months prior to him getting diagnosed, I remember being like, I'm so frustrated that my dad will not connect to emotions. And I called him one day because I think he had told my mom, who had then let me know, because I had asked her, like, what's wrong with dad? I think he feels a little bit bummed that you'll just call him when you're going to get gas and then you have to hang up like 3 minutes later. Like, I think he feels like you don't have time for him, and then you're like, okay, I gotta go. And I'm like, wait, what? Why didn't he tell me? And so I had like really been pushing into like, Dad, I want you to tell me when I affect you. He's like, it's fine. I'm like, no, it's not fine. So we had been for the previous 8 months just kind of engaging more and more with that. And so him and I had kind of gotten to a more tender place. And when he was sick, there were days where I just was like, you're sick, but you're also being so mean and it is not fair. Yeah. And being able to like express that to him. And there were a couple of times that he was just really not kind. And I thought, like, I remember calling you one day because we had a leak in our basement or something, and my mom and I were trying to fix it, and my dad was like, oh my gosh, it was like the most triggered version of him. And I was like, who is this man and why is he being such an asshole? Like, I do not understand. And it was like the first time that I broke under that, because I was aware of him dying and me feeling so much pain from the way that he had showed up to have conversations. Right. And I remember calling you because I was devastated and pissed. And you were
and
like,
it's so confusing. When someone's dying, you're like, am I allowed to say something? Am I not allowed to say something? This is hurtful. I don't know what to do.
Totally. And I think like growing up, I remember every time my parents would leave or at end a phone call, I would have to say, I love you, because I was like, if something bad happens and the last thing I said wasn't, I love you, will I be okay? So now I'm like trying to tell my dad who's dying that he's like being very mean. And you were like, you have to have a conversation with him. That was one of those moments where I was like, you okay, I believe you. And so he knew that I was upset. I was kind of giving him a silent treatment, but also he knew he was very out of line. And so I just needed to like remove myself from him for a little bit. And I remember going into the room that he was in, and he was like, okay, what do you have to say? And I was like, Dad, it's not okay. Like, that was not fun for us. We were trying so hard. And he just listened, and he was like, you're right. He took ownership in a way that he never had most of my life. I was like, kind of like, is this the cancer? Or but also like a little like, wait, why is this happening now? And that was really hard to process too, because I'm like, I feel like I'm starting to finally connect to a part of you. So there was a lot of that in this journey where I'm like letting go of something while getting healing and seeing that there was hope for him to do something, but knowing like he's not actually going to be able to do it for much longer. So it was a wild, very emotional, all over the place process. But I think the thing that I repeatedly felt grateful for was that you had encouraged me to see the freedom in having a hard conversation with my parents years before my dad was sick. And
you practiced it over and over again.
Totally.
So that in the moment like this, it wasn't like, oh, let me start a whole new skill.
Yeah, totally. And I think then being able to confront him and know that I think I learned how to have those conversations, because what I had learned, confrontation, it didn't mean connection.
Right.
So the idea of confronting my dad when he was dying prior to this journey would have been like, I'm just setting myself up for more and more pain and guilt, as opposed to being like, I know that we can have this conversation and I know how to come back and still connect. And so, yeah.
What do you feel over there, Katie? That was a lot.
That was a lot. I watched it all. I was a part of it too. I agree. I mean, I think when Courtney said our basement flooded, we live in an old Victorian house, and I mean, there were so many things that Philip would do that I didn't even know how to do. And I didn't even worry about it because he would just handle it and do it. So you've got a basement filled with water, not completely, but it's pretty filled with water. And he says, go get the vacuum cleaner and take it down and clean it out. And I'm like, this doesn't even make sense.
Right.
Electricity and water standing in it. Like, and I'm trying, and I'm very literal and I'm very visual. And so to try and ask questions like, I don't want to go down there and get zapped before you end up dying. Like, I'm going to die first. It just didn't make sense to me. And I've never done it before. So I don't even know, like, do you hook the hose at a different place or, and everything was short and curt and just go get it done. And I was just like, okay, come on, Court. And so it was frightening. So I didn't have the language to have that conversation. So I'm down there, sucking up water thinking like, oh, when's it going to end? So to watch Courtney be able to have a conversation, cool, calm, and collectively with love involved, and then have that peace back and the acceptance and take ownership, it was like, whew.
To be fair, my cool, calm, and collected conversation came after I called Abby and was like,
well, thank you, Abby, then. Yeah, there were hard times, but it was fun to watch Courtney be able to have a voice. And again, at that point in time, I'm not saying anything.
Right.
I'm just going to be the little meek, mild mouse and just do what I need to do and not make waves, because I hadn't had those conversations, gotten over guilt or shame or, so if something does happen, then I would have all that guilt. So, to watch her have freedom, I thought, oh gosh, there's a different way of living or responding, which was very enticing.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, you're so cute. I just want to grab you.
Guilt is such a heavy monster.
Oh.
People live their entire lives under the fear of the guilt that they might have if they, whatever.
We talked about the broad shoulders. I always had to say, I love you at the end of a conversation. If I didn't, I'd have to call my siblings or whoever back and say it again, because
you were scared that it could be the end.
Did you know that? Honestly,
I was going to say, I pass a lot of good things on to you, Court.
Yeah.
You're a lot like your mom.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Isn't it kind of beautiful how when we hit our greatest fears, we realize that fear isn't actually as, like, it doesn't have as much power as it seems. Like, it has power over our lives, all this power that we give to it. And then we actually face our greatest fear and we go, yeah, that wasn't fun, but it wasn't the end of me. Mm-hmm. Like, Courtney, you're like, oh, I faced my dad dying. It happened. My greatest fear that was weighing me down my entire life happened, and it was painful, but I am alive on the other side of it. And it's so amazing, the chains and the bondage that we as human beings live in to these things that aren't like tangible at all whatsoever.
Yeah.
Do you feel, Katie, like you've been like, what's the progressive freedom that you've been having?
Wait, we're almost there. I'm going to jump in really quick. So why don't do you want to share the story of when you and your mom decided to jump really, really in to the deep end with you?
Yeah, so my dad had died, and then all of my siblings are married with kids, and I still lived back in California. Everyone's in Indiana, and which I already had a bit of codependence in me, but it felt like, oh my gosh, like now I am the single one that is really far away, but like I don't have any other responsibilities. Well, my mom, when my dad died, was like, please go back to California and live your life. Like I actually don't want
really
you.
Sweet.
Yeah. I felt so much freedom to be able to, and I wanted to come back. These were all of the people that I felt the most connected to and known. So I knew that I could leave, but there was still a part of me that was like imagining like what my mom's life is like, because she's been married for 30 some years and now she just is alone, and that tormented me so often. And I remember Abby telling me like, you don't actually have the grace to be in your mom's shoes. So I'm sure it's really hard for her, but what you're imagining isn't actually what she's living out. And that was helpful for me, but it was also like I would go home and be like, this is the first time I've been home in, 6 months since my dad died. And it just was a wave of the freshness of it.
Oh, yeah.
Whereas, she had been in it every day. And so basically probably like a year and a half or something, 2 years after he had passed away, I had been home, which was probably like the fourth time or something. Mm-hmm. And it kind of the first couple of days I feel a little like whiplashy. And then I remember my mom like walking through the house, just rubbing her head a lot, and me being very hyper vigilant and aware of like anything now that felt like change.
Trauma response.
Yeah.
You're like, I will find anything that could be any kind of sign of anything so that I don't have to go through that again.
Mm-hmm. And so she was like, I think I had asked her, my sister was over, and I was like, are you okay? And she was like, yeah, I just have a headache and whatever. I tried to put it away, but it didn't go away very far. And then a couple minutes later, I noticed it again. And my younger sister, I was like, do you think mom's okay? And she's like, I don't know. And so I went and like asked her again, because I actually went and called my best friend and was like, I'm freaking out. My mom has a headache. I don't know how long she's had it for. I'm sure she has a brain tumor. I can't lose both of my parents. And she was like, okay, like, I don't know if that's what's happening, but it makes sense. She did a great job. And I was like, okay, I have to go talk to her. So I went and found my mom, and I was like, okay, how long have you been feeling this? Like, is there anything else that's changed? Like, please give me something that will make me believe you don't have a tumor. And she was like, I just remember her like breaking down and was like, I'm so overwhelmed. Like, your dad died with all of these things in order, but we have this rental that I never had a part of, and that's overwhelming. And I don't want to be a burden to, Lance and Michelle, my sister and brother-in-law that live in town, and ask them for help. And it was just like this like dam broke of all of these things that she was holding. And I was like, are you even sleeping? And she's like, I mean, I get up at like 3:30 and then I kind of fall back asleep, and then I just end up getting up at 5. And the codependent part of me got like angry. I was like, you are not keeping yourself healthy,
because you're like, I need you, Mom.
Yes.
I need
like,
you.
And like essentially is basically then what I said, which maybe was a guilt trip, but whatever. I was like, Mom, I can't have you not take care of yourself.
Right.
I don't have a dad anymore. Everyone else is married. I need you to at least process through your pain. And I think because we had gone on this journey of connecting and having conversations and sharing emotions, it was a really beautiful moment where she heard me, didn't shame spiral, but also I felt really seen in her being like, you're right. I've been scared. I've been keeping it all in. I've just been trying to survive. And so I had come back to, we had gone to the doctor and whatever. There was nothing wrong with her, obviously. But I had come back to California, and I think probably like the next day, I think I had given her Marcus Miller's contact information for life consulting.
He's been on the podcast before.
Yeah.
He's somebody we've trained.
Yeah.
Yep.
And I was like, maybe I don't care who it is. Here's an option. Like, I literally don't care who it is. It can't be me, because I have too many of my own like crazy
triggers.
Yeah. But I need you to talk to someone. And then I had gotten back, and she had sent me like a screenshot of her inbox, which was like 3 months worth of every week booked out.
That is
for
awesome.
Confirmation emails with Marcus.
That is awesome.
And that, I mean, my mom has like the performer in her too. So you can, it's the beauty of that, where she was like, okay, I will show you, I will do it. But I felt so safe and loved in that space. And then, because
literally like her taking care of herself felt like love for you.
Oh yeah. It felt like I was being seen in a way that probably growing up I didn't feel seen, where I was like, what you're doing is affecting me, and I need you to know that it affects me.
Yeah.
and you get to choose what you do with it. I just need you to know that it is affecting me somehow.
Yeah. What was that like for you?
Which part? There was a lot there.
There was a lot there.
I when she says she felt seen and loved, I reciprocate that. Like for her to love me so well that she would want me to get healthy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And she's done that over and over again. But
I love that.
yeah.
And what was the decision hard for you to want to start meeting with somebody? Was it scary? Was
Scary.
Yeah. What were you scared of?
Do I do it right? Am I going to say the right things? Am I going to get the right information? You know, I just very performance oriented. And yeah, I think also finding, gosh, I was going on a journey of who am I minus my husband.
Yeah.
And I just recently, which is a blessing, resigned from volleyball that I had coached for 34 years. So I was like, oh, wow, Lord, that was a passion and love. And, you know, I look at it that Doug was there to help me through that. And then he upped the ante. But I also knew that I could do that. You know, I could get through a loss on my choice. But yeah. And so Marcus has been amazing. I'm really, I'm just so thankful that I've had the opportunity to talk to him so much. And I love the fact that he gives me homework every week. Knock that out. Like, yeah, it's fun. It's been an amazing journey to be on. I would recommend it for everybody.
What do you feel like are some of the things that you've started to learn?
Wow. For sure, triggers. I think one of your podcasts, you guys had said, you know, there's probably 4 categories, and I came up with about 8. I probably could have condensed them a little bit, but I didn't.
Oh, I had like 30 when I started, and then I just started putting them under broader titles.
Yeah, I think
so that it could be like 4.
But I think for me, Marcus, I just think the learned behavior. And I remember my sister, I mean, my middle sister, we were talking one day, and she said, I keep going back to when I was a child. And I said, oh my gosh, I don't think anything about that. Like, that's completely, I don't even give that any consideration after talking to Marcus and sharing those things. And I think, oh my gosh, everything is when I was a child.
Totally.
When Courtney had mentioned, like, you just kind of block things out, I think, oh wow, I didn't recognize anything of childhood behavior, and I realized situations that I will encounter with people is, oh gosh, that's why I had that, because of, you know, when I was a young kid or when I was in high school, or so I think it's also given me the freedom to realize that, oh, this is something that I can break, something that I was never aware of that now I can be, and I catch myself. To have more of a voice of, I think I'm so much also, I don't want to hurt anybody's feelings, that I over-explain things because I want you to understand that it's out of a heart of love, not out of meanness. And so I realized, like, oh, there were so many situations and encounters I had throughout my entire teaching and coaching career that it wasn't me, because I thought I was always the one that was, you know, I was the victim. And I realized, no, it was just my personality of my fears that I had as a child growing up. So it's just given me a lot of freedom. There's a lot of work to do, but
it feels really stunning that instead of going into defeat and hopelessness when your husband died, and listen, that'd be if my husband died, I'd go into defeat and hopelessness. So if you're listening out there and you've done that, there's no shame on it. No. But it's very stunning to watch you choose into a journey of engaging life.
Well, I love life. I mean, I love to have fun. I don't want to. I think I remember back to some women when we were in a small group, and it had been 9 years, and Felka was with me. And she's still crying over, you know, this dog because we got it together, and, you know, just episodes. And I said, oh my gosh, if I ever get like that, shoot me. Like, I don't want to have that kind of like, my mom was 95 and a half when she died. My grandmother was 103. I'm probably going to live a long life. Like, and I don't want to live it
miserable.
Sad, miserable. Yeah. So I thought, I got to figure this out, you know?
Yeah.
And I've got all my kids and my grandkids, and I want to be there for them and with them and be present. So for me, it wasn't an option. I just needed to figure out how to do it.
What do you think was the hardest thing that you've had to face when looking honestly at yourself?
Wow. I think
Light question, Justin.
I know, seriously.
I'm like, I don't even know what I would answer for that. I'm like, oh gosh, everything.
I think that there's coaching and teaching, making decisions that I feel is going to be the best for everybody involved doesn't always make you happy or you happy or their parents happy. And so I think I internalized that as that people then didn't like me. And so I hid away from that.
Yeah.
I always had Bill at my side. And so when he was gone, I was like, oh, wow, I need to face the world. And so realizing that it was more of something internally that I made up.
Wow.
Has been completely freeing. I'll get a little example. Like, I live right on Main Street. So, I mean, a lot of people go by, and I never would go out front. And so Marcus told me that I need to go out front. And so I told him that. I sat on the porch and did my devotions, and Carrie happened to be home for the weekend, and the door was open, and she's like, I don't know where Mom is. She's on the front porch.
I know, it was the most shocking. Like,
I know.
Wait, Mom's out front? Wait, what? Like, we don't even use the front. No, this is not.
36 years of never being out there. And
wow.
I mean, just, yeah.
Wow.
I know. Just like freedom.
What an
Kyle
allegorical
came home and
picture.
I said, guess where I'm at? And he said, in the house. And I said, but where? Guess where? And he goes, on the back porch. No, on the front. You're in the front? You're on the front yard? And I'm like, I am. And then I think I told Courtney, did I tell you this? And she's like, you went out the front? I mean, just like little steps like that, like for most people would be, oh, I'd love to live on Main Street and be out front. I'm like,
sure.
Wow.
You know?
So does that feel like it's a representation of shattering hiddenness inside of your life?
Yeah.
That's so beautiful.
Yeah. I mean, little steps like that people wouldn't even think about. It's like, oh, wow. Freedom. And there's more of those, but that's a huge one.
Oh, yeah.
That's enormous.
That's powerful.
Yeah.
That's really powerful. What has it been like for you watching your mom on this journey?
I felt really loved by it, but also I think just really inspired.
Yeah, I feel that over here listening. I'm like, oh my gosh, I love her.
I know. I think I'm like constantly like tell her that. Like, I feel so inspired by you going after this, because I went on that journey, so I knew what it felt like to some degree, but then all of the different things that she's having to process and alone in a different way that she has not been used to processing pain alone. But also I think there has been this really fun, it feels weird to say, but like when my dad died, this part of my mom that I think I always knew was in there came out. That is like very ditzy and like a little bit like I learned to be embarrassed of it because my dad was like, it was like, Katie, don't do that, you know?
Right.
And so I'm like, ooh, Mom, you're showing a flaw.
I've got many.
You know, and so that has been really interesting too, because it's like I have learned how to, when my mom starts to become more confident in her ditziness that my dad was like really did not have much space for. Yeah. Being like, oh, you feel like yourself, and I feel like I get to celebrate that with you. Like the other day, oh my God, we were working out and she grabbed a tennis ball to throw. My mom is quite athletic, but she grabbed a tennis ball to throw for this dog where we were working out to catch it. And she just like dinged the car that was like 3 feet in front of her, and it was like
a sidearm throw.
Yeah, sure. But it was like I was like, what in the world just like I'm watching it happen. I'm like, literally, how did you just do that? But she like did it, and then her response wasn't shame as much as it was like, wow, I just did that, and I was like, neither can I. it actually felt really funny to like make fun of where I was.
I can't take you anywhere.
Yeah, that is what I said. But in a very like joking way. Whereas any of my friends would have done that in the past. I'd be like, this is hilarious. Totally. But my mom did it, and I'm like, you can't do that. Like, and I think part of it was her response when she would do something because she learned that it was too much. And so now for her to just like do those things and to embrace it has been like, oh, I get to like enjoy you as my mom.
Right.
And who your personality is and the things that you have, start to let come alive. So I think it has felt in a lot of ways really fun for me to see her become a person different than she was with my dad, because now she has a different environment, and so she's not staying in that role, which would have been, fine if my dad was still around. But now that he's not, she's like, okay, then who am I in this space? Right. And that feels really fun to see.
That's beautiful. What do you feel like for because I've seen you feel really healed by your mom. What are maybe getting good at validating or getting good at taking ownership, or like what has her journey, how has that changed in you interacting with her?
I think that probably one of the hardest parts of us processing my pain at the beginning stages was the shame that she would feel.
Yeah, totally.
When I would be like, Abby and I talked about how much I hate my body, and I'm just realizing, like, I remember watching you hate your body, and the response was always like, oh my God, I'm so bad. I can't believe I made you feel that way. And I was like, wait, no, that's not what no, I don't want to have to meet you in your shame spiral.
Now I need to fix you about the thing I was sharing.
And so I had to be like, Mom, it's not fun for me to share with you if you go into shame. I'm sharing because I want you to feel a part of this. I'm not asking you to change something.
Right.
And so meeting with Marcus has really helped her break that shame. So now when I share things, I feel her being present and her just naturally validating things that, I mean, like she said, codependence and like, I can't be okay if you're not okay was a huge part of my childhood. So it was like, anytime I was in pain, the answer was to like, fix it.
Right.
And in a lot of ways, I just needed to be met with like, Court, that's hard. We'll find out the solution and how you're going to have to be powerful later, but I'm just going to meet you in your pain. And so now to see her do that instead of try to fix it has been so healing and connecting for me.
What do you feel? Because when I hear Courtney, it sounds like you guys are probably the closest you've ever been. Does that feel true to you?
Oh, absolutely.
Good answer.
Yeah, just the
good answer. You better say that,
yeah,
Mom.
Exactly.
Yeah,
we'll talk later.
It's just fun to be able to be honest, and I have to work at it because it's not like there's still a part of me like if I share what I'm thinking, how's that going to go over, or are you going to be mad, or I haven't gotten rid of that completely. But I love. Obviously, she's much further along than I am, but I love that she will come back and share things. And I'm a very visual person. When she can put things out there that I can see, and I'm like, oh, yeah, that seems... Yeah, I catch myself doing things that I've done in the past just because I go back into that environment. I don't know if I'm answering your question at all, but it feels good to be able to have conversations and be honest and know that I'm going to be loved no matter how I feel.
I had a client that I got him to start lobbing truth grenades everywhere he went for over the course of a couple months. Just exactly what he felt, he would say it to people. And I said, you're going to make some messes. People are going to feel hurt by your honesty. Try and couple it with kindness in the way that you communicate it, but communicate it. And he said that it was one of the most liberating seasons of his life. And what he realized is that it ultimately didn't decimate his world. Mm-hmm. Like once he went to his worst case scenarios, which was being completely honest with the people around him. Yeah, there was some messes. It was like, oh, I got to clean that up. I maybe could have done that a little different, but that's okay. I did not destroy my relationships. I am still here. People respect me more. They feel relieved being around me. And so as a side note, as you continue, because you're still on this journey of this, you have permission to lob some truth grenades and watch your worst case scenarios happen where the messiest things happen. And then as you reel it back from that place, you realize, It wasn't the end of the world, just like it has been with Courtney. And again, you already have been being proactively honest and stuff, but I give you permission to lob some. Yeah.
I think I might do overhead versus sidearms.
Yeah.
They might be a little bit more successful.
Someone else's car. You didn't intend to.
That's funny.
I know we're wrapping this up. Is there any last things that you wanted to ask?
Yeah, well, there's just a couple last questions. One would be, so you're doing Living Fully Live.
I am.
What has that been like for you?
Oh, I love it. It's, first of all, I love the banter between the two of you because I look at comments that you guys say and I'm like, is that going to be received? Oh, no. Because the world that I grew up in, like that would have been 2 weeks worth of not talking to each other.
Wow.
And so just to see that is, so keep bringing it on. Obviously that's
Thanks, Katie.
between the two of you. But so I love that part. But just, I think when I told Marcus that I was going to do it, Courtney had said, hey, do you want to do this? And I'm like, oh, what if I'm not very good at it? What if I don't understand the language? What if I went right to performance and perfection. And Marcus goes, we can work it out together.
Yeah.
You're going to know the language. We've talked a lot about this. And I think that's the biggest thing for me in anything is like, I don't want to not succeed. Who's going to check my homework? Like I'm so performance and I'm like, nobody's checking this. So I've got a document and I've got it in red and, it's all there. And then if I get behind, then I panic. So I got to sit down and get it all taken care of. And I think, it's just me and you guys, but it's really been enlightening to realize and look back at scenarios within my life. I think that's the biggest thing is when you actually have to sit down and look back. And there's times that I'm like, I don't know. And so I'll ask my sister and she seems like she remembers everything from our childhood.
Wow.
And I can come back and talk to her about it or connect the dots. And it's just been so freeing to realize that what I'm experiencing now really did start when I was a child, but I had no idea.
It gives you a lot more compassion.
Oh, it does.
For yourself when you understand that you're not just doing these weird random things.
And there's times where I don't have an opportunity to live that out anymore because I did retire from teaching this summer, but I've subbed a couple times and done lifeguarding for the younger kids. And so I've been then able to be honest and experience that. And I say to Marcus, oh my gosh, I have to tell you what I did this week. And I think I'm 63 and I'm telling that somebody I was honest with. And I think, oh my gosh, it feels so good. And he's like, that is huge.
It's huge.
Yeah.
And I think it's brave of you, by the way, as a side note, to engage this type of journey like that.
Yes.
And to jump into living
Very
fully alive
brave.
and stuff and be like, I'm going to try to learn a whole new set of tools that I may not have. And I'm going to look at things that I could just keep cruising along and acting like it didn't exist. But, the truth is for you, given your mom's history and your grandma's history, you got another 40 some years of having to be here.
That's what I was like.
Having to
be here. I want to be stuck in this turtle shell. That's what Marcus says. You're like in a turtle shell, your whole world inside there. And when you stick your head out, I'm like, oh,
That's so
like
cute.
that. Again, that visual was like, oh, it makes sense.
Absolutely.
The shell is swirling.
Yeah. What has it been like to just have common language with your mom and be able to have like similar?
I think the security of knowing that no matter how messy it gets, we're going to be able to get to a place of connection and having conversation. So I think me not having to teach her what I'm trying to say, while I would still show up and do it, has felt like such a weight lifted off where we can just have that conversation. And so it just like cuts through a lot of the work that could feel a bit frustrating and exhausting, to be able to be like, this is this thing that you've learned. I know that Abi and Justin have taught on this, and to be able to be like, oh, okay. And I think specifically with my mom, it helps with her performance part where she's like, oh, I've been taught this somewhere. What you're saying, I can go back and connect to like, oh, right. That's the victim mentality or whatever, as opposed to, I don't know what you're saying. And then she shuts down.
Right.
I'm like, ugh. Okay.
So you're like living fully alive and working with Marcus has like given language and concepts so that when it comes up in conversations, the conversations can go through it more than just get shut down and blocked.
Yeah, because I think the part of her that was like, I don't know what you're saying, would then go into fight or flight mode and just like or
Shut
freeze.
down.
And so she would just freeze. And then it felt like the conversation would end. And so to have the same language to be like, no, you do know what I'm talking about. You know, it has just felt really, really connecting and helpful.
What I was realizing, well, you guys were sharing your story, is the other day, my dad and I had a confrontation on the house stuff. Big surprise.
Surprise.
And it ended up me over at his house after our exchange, sitting down, dialoguing with him, and my mom was there. And the one thing that my dad said is, he's like, when the two of you talk to me, I just feel lost because none of it makes sense what you're saying to me. But my mom and I have grown in our bond because my mom did Living Fully Alive as well and went through all this process. So my mom and I have this deeper bond, not because everything's perfect between us, but because the communication barrier has been removed between us and we have that common language. And I think in most relationships across the board, especially when it comes to emotional
Husband,
content,
wives, mother, father, sister, brother.
there's a breakdown as far as the communication goes. And so a lot of times they're often saying the same thing in different ways, but becoming progressively more offended with each other. Like, I don't understand what you're saying. How could you say that to me? But I realized, again, that bond that happened between my mom and I found myself sitting there being like, I really hope my dad is willing to go on the journey further to get the language so that we can.
I literally thought, if your dad did LFA, our lives would change. That would be so nice.
Because we'd have reference points. And like you said, it
and
eases,
core values. Like, so now they understand, oh, that person's not trying to shame me.
Yeah.
right.
That's what I was just going to say is I think that, like, if I can speak for Felt, and I can because he's not here, I think that there was so much of privacy and nobody needs to know your business. Nobody needs to know what's going on. Or if something, like if Courtney would have, I would have taken all of that on like, oh my gosh, I didn't do a great job at parenting, da-da-da. And we just had a conversation yesterday and it's like, I did the best I knew how at the time I knew how. And I didn't have any of those skills. And so I think for me, I realized like I could live a long life and I don't want to be stuck and I do want to be free and I do want to be progressive and I do want to make sure that I feel comfortable and not guilty. And so I'm very willing to take those steps to figure out like, oh, there's so much of my childhood that has been hidden for me just to survive.
Yeah.
And I passed on so much that I didn't want to pass on to my children, my children.
Totally. Says every parent always.
Yeah. And I've loved when you said every parent's going to screw up their kids. And I'm like, oh, okay, so I'm not alone.
Absolutely.
But to not have all that guilt placed upon me too.
Well, and it's really beautiful because I've watched Courtney get healed because she can talk to you and she'll go to you and say, I'm feeling these feelings from childhood. And you'll say, yeah, it was like that.
Yeah.
You're right. It really, and that means you've gone through breaking shame in your life, which is such a, I mean, that was the beginning of your story too. When we break shame, we can take ownership and validate. And we teach on in Living Fully Alive how much validation is literally will change the course of your life in the healing process. But for you to be able to now validate things,
acknowledge the reality of that stuff.
Acknowledge
it
what
doesn't
happened.
take away my love for my kids, or it just is like, oh wow, I didn't realize I was doing those things, and I do love them and I do want the best for them, but I didn't do the best job that I could do, but I did the best I knew how.
Which is the best we have.
Yeah.
And I think we
Welcome
can
to
all
life.
look back. There's not a day that like I always look back like 10 years ago and I'm like, oh, well, that was the best I knew how.
Yeah.
Little crazy, but the best I had.
Me too. I'm like, wow, I was trying really hard.
Did you have something you wanted to say?
Yeah, I was just thinking about the conversation that you and I had the other day where I was like, I have to tell you about this thing my mom validated, because I think for somebody, maybe one of the most healing parts is that the person who lived my life with me is able to look and be like, no, you're not making that up. And it doesn't feel, at least for me where I'm at right now, I'm like, oh, I can connect to the grief of it, but to feel like, Mom, I remember feeling like things were so tense if something went wrong, and then I think I shut down in that way, and this is how I think I started processing it, and I'm like, does that feel true, or do you think am I making that up? And she was like, no, that actually feels exactly like how it was. And it wasn't like, yes, I knew my dad was failing me there. It was like, oh, okay, I'm not being crazy.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not being crazy. And this makes sense why I show up in spaces now. But for some, like, you would validate it all the time, and it felt helpful.
Yeah, I'd be
and
like,
very
I know
different
that this
than
happened.
my mom validating it.
Right, because then you can actually say, oh, I know that's truth when mom validates it because she was there.
She was
in
there.
it.
Yeah.
Right.
And that's one of the most healing things that anyone can do for somebody, is to validate what reality was.
Yeah.
That is one of the biggest
the
things your
acknowledgement
mom
of
did
that.
with you.
Yeah, she did. When she acknowledged my reality of what I experienced, I didn't need her to hate herself.
Yeah.
No.
Her just acknowledgement of, yes, it happened. Yes, it was painful, undid me in the best of ways, and allowed me to really go deep in the healing process. Because when someone is older than you, so a parent is consistently saying that didn't happen, not acknowledging that, you feel a breakdown between reality and whatever this other thing is. So like you said, it's crazy making. And so you can never actually, if you can't acknowledge that it happened, then there's no place to land with compassion and grief. Like, I can't grieve something that didn't happen.
I know. You're
if
like,
someone
what do I
keeps
do
saying,
with this?
that didn't happen, but I'm pretty sure it did, and I should be able to grieve, but I can't because the whole world's telling me it didn't happen. So that can be so confusing. But
Yeah, my counselor says when your reality isn't acknowledged, it's crazy making.
Yeah.
And so, but most parents can't acknowledge the reality because they have too much shame, too much blame, too much guilt, too much denial, too much I just blocked everything out, all of that. And so to be able to face your own pain, and I think this is the interesting thing about the Living Fully Alive course. Living Fully Alive isn't necessarily like, oh, now everything in your life is instantly magical. You have to like actually connect to yourself, which is what the course is about, because being disconnected from ourselves, being disconnected from other people, and being disconnected from God literally creates where you're living less alive.
Yep. And so it really, at the end of the day, is the foundational tools to start building the life that you'd hope and dream for to have.
If you were because Courtney worked for Living Fully Alive, just thoughts on what you saw people experience going through it.
I mean, I think becoming more connected to themselves and connecting to their reality was really shocking to people, but then so freeing to be, and being able to be validated. We were talking about that last night, but for people to let themselves connect to how they experience something and then say it and have someone validate that space has night and day changed people's ability to show up for themselves and their story. And so I think consistently letting someone share a part of their process, and me like stopping and being like, wait, that would have been really painful, and them like sitting on it longer than and they're like, oh yeah, okay, that is true. So the way that it's set up to dig into what have you really experienced, what are your belief systems, could feel really easy to just skim past or really sitting in it. And I think that is where I saw people get so much breakthrough.
Yeah, Courtney was one of the mentors. We have an immersion program and a mentorship program. So we have 3 different options. You can do the course or do the course with people in live consulting every week and live heart syncs every week. Or
you get to watch people actually get walked through the emotional process. So if you've ever wanted to see what that looks like for someone in a consulting process, you have 14 weeks of watching it happen live. And then you get to deeply engage with a community of people in the immersion program through the heart sync process, where people get to share their breakthroughs and their fears and their pains, and you get to have those exchanges, so that camaraderie begins to take place inside of that space.
Yeah, and they get to all be like processing all of their stuff together. So
first year we've done a second round, and so we did that, and sign-ups.
Do you recommend it, Katie?
Oh, I was just going to say, can I jump in here?
Yes.
I would highly recommend it. It's been so incredible to have I actually have threefold. I have Courtney, but I also have Marcus, and then to have Living Fully Alive. And I look so forward to the next week's episode, and just to be able to listen. But it has been an amazing program, and I'm so thankful for it. I would encourage anybody to do it.
Oh, thanks so
Thanks
much.
for saying that.
You guys
Katie.
are so sweet. There's so many times I wanted to jump across this room and hug you both. Thank you for being so tender and vulnerable and present, and for paying the price.
Yeah.
It's going to be so encouraging to so many people to hear your story.
Yeah. If you guys want to join Living Fully Alive, you can go to Justin and Abi, that's abi.com, and sign up for it there, and bring your family with you. Jump in on it and partake and go on the journey. Also, if you got anything out of this, rate, review, subscribe, and share. We always say it, but send it to other family members, like where you see friends that you care about and family members that you care about, where you're like, I want to get on the same page together. Let's talk about the possibility of healing. Here's what it can look like. Like, here's a great story between Katie and Courtney of mother and daughter going on their own personal journeys and together facing their fears, and then beginning a bonding process in an entirely different way. You don't have to let life happen to your relationships, and you don't have to let life happen to you. You can take back your life through means like this and create a really beautiful, healthy experience.
Yeah.
So, all right.
I wish, like, that's what I would have done if I could have made my parents do this years ago. I would have made them.
Right. Participate in it. You guys
make
do this.
people do it.
So make
It's
people.
worth it.
It's very emotionally healthy to force people to do things.
And
Guilt and manipulation.
yeah, just a little bit of guilt and manipulation.
And Courtney is one of the mentors that we've trained.
Yeah.
And what Living Fully Alive was created for was because so many people are asking me to train them in being life consultants. All of my life consultants' schedules are filled, and there's waiting lists to get into them, because the more skills you have, the more people want to meet with you. So we created Living Fully Alive originally for people who wanted to be life consultants, so that there was the key foundational principles that we use in every meeting, that people could start with that foundation. We've had counselors go through it, and all kinds of people, and love it. So anyway, if you're wanting to become a consultant, there's
a pathway to that.
There's a pathway
beginning
to
with LFA. So, all right, everybody. You guys, thanks so much for being here.
Thank you.
We're going away.
Bye.
Bye.